we're going to look first of all at the book of Genesis. And so in the book of Genesis, this is the first book in the Bible and in the Pentateuch. And this is the creation story, the famous, of course, creation story, the creation of the world. And in this story, I think that what we will find is kind of the first thing that we can learn, and that is that that chaos, the sea, the chaotic state of things is not necessarily purely a negative thing. It's not purely a negative image. Rather, it provides an opportunity for transformation and for creation itself. When we think about the Genesis account, when it talks about God's creation of the world, it says that at first the world is without form and void. It's kind of empty and formless. And then it says an interesting thing. It says that the Spirit of God, the Spirit of creation, of the creative force in the world, it says that the Spirit of God hovers over the waters. And I think that's such an interesting thing because, again, this idea of the primordial sea, it's like the state of chaos out of which everything else emerges. And so it says that the Spirit of God hovers over the waters, and then God speaks and God begins to bring life. And the way that God brings life and form to the formlessness is that God calls up life, and he brings life, and he brings the world and land and dry ground and order up out of the sea of chaos. So we see that the chaotic the chaotic state of the world, this image of the sea, is not purely one that needs to be looked at as being just a negative thing or an adversary to be fought against. I think a lot of times we can look at the chaotic state of our own lives and almost want to just despair, or we look at the chaotic state of our lives or of the world and we just think of it as something to struggle against. It's just an adversary. It's just something that we have to overcome, that we have to deal with, that we have to face. And I think that there's a different way of looking at it, which is to look at the chaos and the disorder and the uncertainty that we may experience as being the state out of which life emerges. That, in a sense, it is the sea, it is the chaos that is the prerequisite for life itself. That the way in which God creates in the story is that he brings life up and out of this state of chaos. And so without that, if you don't have that, you actually don't have life. You don't have what you need for the possibility for life itself. And so we can see that that is the state of things. And if we continue with the story, in that first chapter of Genesis, we see God bringing the dry land up out of the sea, but then we also see this other aspect too, which is we begin to see vegetation coming up out of the land. And once again, it's the same kind of image, because if you think about let's see here, what the chaotic sort of element represents, or what sort of images that we can use that tie in with this, it's chaos is fragmentation, right? You could think of it as that chaos is what happens when order disintegrates all the way down, when things kind of get fragmented all the way down to their smallest constituent parts. And things are always in a state of doing this. Things are always in a state of kind of fragmenting down and getting back to that place. But think about this as another way of looking at it. Think about vegetation. Think about a garden. Think about things that grow and things that rise up and that form life and bear fruit and make life possible, make other forms of life possible, these kinds of things. What is the necessary prerequisite for those things? It's soil, isn't it? It's dirt. And so without dirt, you don't have a garden. And that is the case even in the book of Genesis as well, that the Garden of Eden, right, this kind of paradise that God creates, it rises up out of soil. It rises up out of dirt. And what is dirt? What is soil? Soil is when you take living things and you fragment them all the way down, right? You take trees and you take organisms and they die and they break apart and they fall to pieces and they go all the way down to this most disintegrated state to where you can't even recognize, there's no recognizable form of life that's even left in it. And that's what soil is. And that is the substrate. That is the that is the prerequisite for all life to come up out of. So you have to have dirt. A lot of times we want to just have the garden, right? We want to see the fruit and all those kinds of things, but you don't get fruit without growth first, without planting seeds. And you don't get planting seeds. You're not able to plant seeds without having soil in the first place, which is that state of death. It is that state of disintegration all the way down. And this continues through the biblical narratives. We see even in the gospel accounts where Christ is teaching his disciples, and one of the things that he's most famous for using, and one of his favorite images to use, is the image of agriculture, right? So he has all of these parables, these kinds of stories that he uses to teach his disciples things about the way the world works. And one of the things that he says when he's talking to them about this is he says that it's necessary for things to die. He says it's necessary for, unless a kernel of wheat, unless a seed, unless a plant dies and scatters its seeds and the seeds fall to the ground, you're never going to get more plants. You're never going to get more life. You're never going to get the harvest. You'll never get there at all, because death is necessary. Chaos is necessary. It's necessary for things to fragment down in order for new life to come up out of that. And I think that is something that we experience even in our own lives as well, that wherever we experience chaos, there is the potential for new life. We see it once again a couple of times kind of playing out even in the life of Christ. We see the idea that when Christ is first born, we see Mary, and Mary is this woman who gets chosen by God to bear the Christ child. And when this happens, it says that the Spirit of God comes and overshadows her or rests upon her. That's that image again of the Spirit of God hovering over the waters, except this time the waters that are being hovered over are the waters of childbirth. They are it is a human being that is sort of hovered over, and the world gets created again anew in that way. And she gives birth to Christ, and then Christ goes on to do all of the things that he does. And we read about this in the Gospels and in the life of Christ. We see once again the same kind of imagery that when Christ is beginning his ministry, he goes out and is baptized. And this image of being baptized is this image of him going down and the body going down under the waters and then coming back up and being raised back up again. And it says that when he does this, that the Spirit of God comes down and rests upon him. And it's that same idea again, the Spirit of God hovering over the waters, that in order to be able to rise up and go on to that next step, whatever that thing is, that next step of the journey, the hero's journey, right? These are all of these various steps, these moments of transformation, whether it's birth or whether it is coming of age or whether it is going out into the world to do the kinds of works that are intended for us to do. Each of those requires death. It requires a going down into the waters of chaos and coming back up again. And it says that the Spirit of God, that creative Spirit, is there recreating the world anew. And we act this out. We live it out. We live out these same stories in our own lives, but we have to be willing to go down before we can be raised back up again. And so, like, for example, I'm thinking here of some of the kinds of experiences that we may go through in our lives. I'm thinking of, like, let's say you have kids, right? So I'm thinking here of maybe there's a young mother, which is why I bring up, the image of Mary there with her experience. But we can think about it even in our own experiences. It's like you have this young mother and she has a baby, and the next thing you know, it's like you have a state of order. The world is in this kind of state of order and everything is great. And then all of a sudden here comes this baby, and now all of a sudden everything is chaos, and then maybe there's you've got a couple of kids, they come along and the chaos just continues, and it just becomes more and more chaotic, and there's like applesauce on the walls, and there's Legos on the floor, and you're stepping on the Legos, and things are breaking, and it's just noise and madness, and it's chaos, and it's just terrible, right? Like, that is the experience of having kids. Like, that's what that experience is. And you can imagine being a parent or being a mother or a father in this situation, and looking at this and being like, why am I doing this? Like, what is going on? You can become completely overwhelmed by this kind of experience. And what I think is really important to remember in the midst of all this is that when we're looking at the chaos around us, that when you find yourself with your arms kind of plunged down into the chaos, when you find yourself going down into the chaos and bringing up order up out of that, and raising up things and bringing up new life, right? Like planting seeds in the ground and having it grow and those kinds of things. When we have that experience, when we find ourselves in that kind of experience, what we can learn from these stories, or what we can remind ourselves and what we can encourage ourselves with, is this, that is the business of life. That means that you are doing life. Like, that is what it is. And sometimes we look at it and we think, oh, I must be doing something wrong because it's chaos. No, like, that is the creative act. That is what happens in the Genesis account when God reaches down and brings up life out of the earth. And we ourselves, in the same way, we live that out. And so whatever it is that we're doing, whether it's having a child or starting a business or beginning a creative project or whatever we do, it's messy, it's chaos, it's the sea, right? It's going back down into the waters and then bringing order up out of that. But that's what we're intended to do. And so we can encourage ourselves in that way, that when we experience that, we need to remind ourselves that this is life. This is life itself. This is the creative act that we get to participate in.